Week 4, fantasy football, running back tier list. Now, you guys might be wondering, why is this coming out on a Friday? Well, I am going to my future brother-in-law's wedding all weekend long, so I'm pushing a long day here on Thursday evening to record this video for you guys, get the running back tier list out. A big time PSA in the Will They Play tier. I am recording this Thursday evening, so there's going to be a lot probably injury-wise that is going to change from now until Saturday, Sunday when you guys are watching this. I will post any updates in the pinned comment down below regarding players whose rankings have changed, players who are expected to play, players who are expected to be out, but we're going to do our best here to play detective on what's happened so far. So the Will They Play tier, the part that I talk about every single week, breaking down the major injuries, I only have 1 or 2 practice reports on all these guys, but we're going to do our best here. So in the Will They Play tier, we have a couple guys that are major injury question marks. For starters, we have Joe Mixon of the Houston Texans still not practicing on Wednesday or on Thursday. I would imagine he is going to be out for another game, and also Dameon Pierce is not practicing. So we are probably going to be firing up Cam Akers yet again this week. Kenneth Walker plays on Monday Night Football, so we only have 1 practice report so far to go off of when I'm recording this. I would imagine, and head coach Dan Campbell of the Detroit Lions said that they expect to go up against Kenneth Walker from the Seattle Seahawks this week. I think he will be back on Monday Night Football, so I do have him ranked outside of my top 15, 18 running backs because it is a tough matchup against the Detroit Lions. He is ranked as a low-end RB2 for me, but I did talk about him here in the Will They Play tier section because he is still coming off of that injury. He's missed 2 games as a result of that. We do have Raheem Mostert as well, probably coming back this week. He returned to practice in a limited fashion. He will be in the flex play territory as well if he is projected to play. See updates in the pinned comment as well. Austin Eckler already been ruled out with a concussion, so no worries there. Brian Robinson's going to see an upgrade. Jaylen Warren, from what Nick Farabaugh here, a Steelers beat reporter, has heard and what he's been reporting on, Jaylen Warren probably not going to be active this week against the Indianapolis Colts, so it looks like it should be the Najee Harris show in that backfield. And then Bucky Irving popped up on the injury report Wednesday, limited participant with a hamstring injury, and then Thursday ended up fully missing practice, did not practice at all. He says he will play, but to be honest, I'm a little bit skeptical knowing that he did not practice after being limited the day prior. So those are the major injuries. Again, any updates I will post down below in the pinned comment. But let's talk about the locked-in running back starts, running backs 1 through 12. These guys are in your lineup as far as who could overperform and who could underperform. I always break down some of the running backs who have good matchups, bad matchups, high-scoring games, and I like to highlight a guy or two to talk about recent usage trends as well. So, elite running backs who have good matchups this week. We have Devon Achane, Aaron Jones, James Conner, Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall, and Jonathan Taylor. Of my top 12 running backs on the week, those are the guys that are there mainly because they have great matchups. Elite running backs who are in high-scoring games this week. We have James Conner again, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Saquon Barkley, and Aaron Jones. All of those guys in projected high-scoring games, 45 or more point over-unders. And then some elite running backs who have some bad matchups this week. We have Alvin Kamara, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Bijan Robinson, Jordan Mason, and Kyron Williams. And by bad matchups, I just mean that they're going up against a tough run defense, so they might struggle from that perspective and efficiency standpoint. Some of the guys that I want to highlight from this top 12 tier, Jonathan Taylor had a spike in his usage back up to the week 1 levels that we saw. I talked about last week how I didn't really believe this 49 or 48% snap share that he had in week 2 was going to continue, and that's why he was one of my biggest buy lows last week on our trade targets video, which is why if you bought him low, you got a top 4 performance out of him, and that was all great news. So Jonathan Taylor obviously back to his old self. James Conner also spiked up in his usage a little bit. I'm not sure what this means exactly, but Trey Benson played a season low in snaps, and James Conner was mainly the guy that was out there. So even though he had a bad game, 3.5 PPR points, he was still very heavily involved in this offense, and the Cardinals and Commanders actually is the highest over-under of any game this week, so definitely a intriguing matchup. And speaking of the Cardinals and Commanders, let's get right into my high-end RB2s here. We're going to go through my running back 13 through 18 as we always do. We go in-depth after the top 12. Brian Robinson is my RB13 this week, and as I just mentioned, high-scoring game environment, highest over-under on the slate at 50.5 points, no Austin Eckler. So this is a game where Brian Robinson, like you saw last week, should be up near the 70, 75, 80% snap share range, and also we saw him run a season high in routes against the Bengals because Eckler was banged up in that game. So he is actually my start of the week this week. I feel very, very confident in Brian Robinson Jr. this week. Running back 14 for me is Travis Etienne. Now, everybody is ready for the Jacksonville Jaguars funeral because they are 0-3. They have not been good this year. However, Travis Etienne does have a top 6 running back matchup this week, and his workload is as good as it's always been. Plus, the Houston Texans are now dealing with a couple injuries. Tank Dell not expected to play. Nico Collins popped up today on the injury report, so they could be banged up on the offensive side of the ball. And if it's a good matchup and it stays a close game, I feel really good about Travis Etienne in this matchup. He's been a mid RB2 every week for me. We just haven't seen that RB1 blow up yet. We haven't seen the big performance. He's got RB21, RB20, and RB18 finishes the last 3 games. 0-3 team back against the wall on the road. I actually think the Jags could steal this game. If you guys want to bet a money line that's an underdog, I actually don't mind the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. And the game has a 45.5 point over-under, so I do think there should be some points in this matchup between the Jaguars and the Houston Texans. Moving on to my running back 15, and that is Derrick Henry, 46.5 point over-under. The Ravens are favored at home by 2.5 points, and Derrick Henry, as we saw last week, works very well when the Ravens are winning, right? When the Ravens were beating the crap out of the Cowboys all game last week, we saw Derrick Henry run it down their throats, get a lot of carries, score touchdowns. That's what he does best. Derrick Henry had a monster 30-point performance in week 3. I would highly encourage you to shop him on your open market. See if you can get up to a better option. See if you can buy low on Devon Achane. See if you can buy low on James Cook. See if you can buy low on somebody like that, because Derrick Henry is a mid RB2, boomer bust RB2, touchdown or bust RB2 for me rest of season. But he does have a good matchup this week, so I do have him at RB15. And as you saw, the workload spike in that game because they were winning. It could be the same against Buffalo. It is a home game for them. They are favored, but as we just saw, the Buffalo Bills are a pretty good team, and they could definitely go into that game and be down. And we know what happens when the Ravens are playing from behind. We don't see Derrick Henry on the field. We see a healthy dose of Justice Hill. So running back 16 for me on the week is Josh Jacobs of the Green Bay Packers. He is a little bit lower in my rankings than he probably should be just based on his workload and what we've seen from him. Not to mention, it looks like Jordan Love should return for this game. It's a really important game. The Vikings are 3-0. It's a divisional matchup. I could see Jordan Love trying to make it back for this one. According to most reports, it sounds like he's going to be like a game-time decision. It's the Vikings, man. They have been such a good defense. That is why Josh Jacobs is lower for me in my rankings. They confused the crap out of CJ Stroud and Bobby Slowick last week, confused the crap out of Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy the week before that. They're also the 3rd best defense against fantasy running backs, so temper your expectations for Josh Jacobs efficiency-wise, and also, too, his workload strangely dipped with Emmanuel Wilson playing more than usual. I don't think it's going to be a serious concern. I think it kind of reminds me a little bit of when Deontay Foreman randomly just like worked into the workload over Jerome Ford. I could see this being a blip on the radar just like it was for JT as well, but something to monitor going forward. How much is Emmanuel Wilson playing? How much is Josh Jacobs playing, and that kind of thing. So RB17 for me on the week is David Montgomery. He is currently actually outscoring Jahmyr Gibbs in fantasy, one of the 2 million things that have happened in the most piss-wasted season I've ever seen in my life. Everybody's hurt. Nobody's producing like we all thought. Christian McCaffrey's never going to play a football game again. I don't know what the hell is going on this season, but David Montgomery outscoring Jahmyr Gibbs is not something I had on my bingo card. He is a great play this week, though. The Seahawks defense is quite stingy. They've been really good this year against the pass and against the run, but the over-under in that game is 46.5 points, and I really do like that game to shoot out. We've seen the Seahawks and Lions just have absolute barn burners before. I believe they had like a 45-42 game like 2 years ago, and I could see that being the case again in this one. So running back 18, closing out this tier of high-end RB2s for me, is Zach Moss, who has been a workhorse the last 2 weeks. I was all over him last week, but man, my Chase Brown bags have been reduced to handcuff status. He has not been really anything. He's been efficient when he gets the touches, but Zach Moss is easily the workhorse here. I'll stop crying about my Chase Brown bags and just tell you that Zach Moss is a smash play against the Panthers. 48.5 point over-under. That's the second highest on the slate. 4-point favorites are the Cincinnati Bengals against the 27th ranked rush defense DVOA. The Bengals are 0-3. They are trying to win a game for the first time this year, and I do think that they are going to take care of a team that overperformed their expectations last week. I know Andy Dalton looked great. I know the Panthers looked great last week, but come on now. I think Bengals -4 or -4.5, wherever you get it at. I think it's the lock of the century. I think this is a back against the wall game. They're going to take care of business all day, every day. Low-end RB2s for me this week. RB19, Rachaad White, might be the most disrespected man in fantasy football because everybody wants to crown his backup and say that he is complete dog shit, and he definitely is not running as well as he could be running as well as his teammate Bucky Irving. Elite running back workloads with great receiving ability is not anything to be sad about, fellas. Bucky is banged up. He's not practicing today, as I teased already. He did not practice in a full capacity on Wednesday, dealing with a hamstring injury, and if Bucky Irving isn't playing, I'll probably actually slide Rachaad White up a few spots and maybe down a few spots if Bucky Irving is going to play and be a full go. Bucky said he wants to play. Bucky said he's going to play, but I think even if he does play, he should be limited to some capacity. The Eagles are 22nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position, so it is a pretty good matchup, and also they've struggled specifically with pass-catching running backs, and they're missing A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in this game, most likely, so I think the Bucs can actually control this one and can actually have a good performance here. So Devin Singletary, a guy that I feel really good about tonight. As you guys can see on the screen there, the workload is great for Devin Singletary, and the Cowboys defense has been horrible against the run. They rank 31st against the run in the league so far this year, and Devin Singletary actually leads all running backs minus Jordan Mason in missed tackles forced this year, and he's 10th in yards after contact per attempt. So this Giants offense all of a sudden is functional. As I talked about a couple weeks ago, I really thought this was going to be the case. Devin Singletary looks good. Daniel Jones looks half decent. Malik Neighbors is probably an all-pro receiver if we had to vote on it right now. So I do like Devin Singletary to put up some points in this game against the Dallas Cowboys, which I expect to go over. Running back 21 for me on the week is Kenneth Walker. I know I talked about him in the will they play tier, and I don't usually double up and put them in the will they play tier and then also put them in the tier list, but he is the one guy that it appears he's trending towards playing. So I am going to put him here and talk about him again because in week 1, we saw him have a monster performance, had a big breakaway touchdown, looked great, but Zach Charbonnet was a workhorse in his absence. So are we going to see Kenneth Walker in week 1 at full health, or are we going to see some kind of split backfield? And also, again, the Detroit Lions are the best run defense in the league right now. They are stingy as hell against the fantasy running back position. So I am a little bit worried about Kenneth Walker. If he does end up playing, no limitations, let's say, again, they're playing Monday. So they got 3 practices before Monday's game. Today was the first one. It appears he was limited in today's practice. If he gets another limited in Friday's practice, and then on Saturday he's a full participant, I'll feel pretty comfortable ranking him as a top 24 guy. But if he's like doubtful or questionable still going into the game, he practices in a limited fashion all week, I might move him down even a little bit lower than this because it is a bad matchup and he could come in a little bit more so as like a flex play rather than a, top end RB1 or RB2. So RB22 for me is Najee Harris. Not so efficient of Najee Harris. We know this about him, but it is very good that Jaylen Warren is probably going to be out for this game because Najee Harris should get a big time workload and we might get vintage rookie season Najee Harris for a game or two, especially if Warren misses any extended time. It sounds like he's going to be like week to week. Cordero Patterson is likely going to factor into this backfield in the most Arthur Smith fashion possible, but Indianapolis is only 23rd against fantasy running backs, so it is a good spot for Najee Harris to have a good game here. We've seen, kind of like a 45 to 55 or 60-ish% snap share over the last 2 years since Jaylen Warren's been a fixture of this backfield, but we could see him spike up this week to like a 70% snap share with Jaylen Warren out of the lineup. So running back 23 for me on the week is Ramondre Stevenson, who had a shit week in week 3. I mean, if you played Ramondre Stevenson, he rewarded you with 0.3 fantasy points, fumbling and missing half the game against the Jets on Thursday Night Football. However, we were 1 week removed from the fact that Ramondre Stevenson was basically an RB1 through the first 2 games. I'm not really tilted off of Ramondre. I have him in one league, and I feel pretty good about him still. Drake May still looms as like untapped potential upside to this offense, and Jacoby Brissett was playing fine prior to the Week 3 game where he looked pretty terrible against the New York Jets. So facing the 49ers isn't ideal. They're actually 10-point underdogs and implied for the lowest amount of points per Vegas in the entire league, but this is a pretty good workload that we're getting with Ramondre Stevenson. So I would be just playing him basically as a touchdown or bust RB2, even though he is going up against a top 5 fantasy running back defense in the San Francisco 49ers. Running back 24 for me is J.K. Dobbins. Ironically, was kind of overvalued for like 2 weeks there because he was churning out top 5 weeks off of long runs and big plays, but now he's actually getting the work. In week 3, he posted a season high in snaps, in routes, in rush attempt share, all that good stuff. The box score wasn't great, and that's why people are maybe a little bit panicked on J.K. Dobbins. Plus, Justin Herbert is injured right now, and it looks like he's going to try and play in this game against Kansas City, but we don't know for sure. And if J.K. Dobbins is running behind a Taylor Heineke-led offensive performance here with Joe Alt potentially being out on the right tackle spot, it's not going to be a good matchup. The Kansas City Chiefs ranked top 10 against the fantasy running back position. If Justin Herbert plays, that's obviously bullish. I'll probably move him up a couple spots, but I'm kind of meeting that with a little bit of pessimism right now. A lot of the docs that I've been following have been saying it would not be smart for Justin Herbert to play against a good pass rush without your right tackle. He's still banged up. He's at risk of re-aggravating that injury. So hopefully they sit him down for a game and Justin Herbert is better long-term, because as a J.K. Dobbins manager in my home league, I can live with 1 week where J.K. Dobbins is not at his best because Justin Herbert isn't there, if it means that Justin Herbert isn't going to go on IR after this week after taking a bad hit from Chris Jones landing on his ankle or something like that. So hopefully J.K. Dobbins has a good performance regardless. My next rated running back is into the flex plays tier, which is Cam Akers at running back 25 for me. Last week's game got really out of hand for Cam Akers and the Houston Texans. 82% of the carries, though, did go to Cam Akers without Joe Mixon, without Dameon Pierce in the lineup, which it appears that is going to be the case yet again. The Texans were just kind of getting romped by the Vikings, and the game was, a lot of Dario Gumbawale because they were playing from behind. The Jags are hungry for a win, which I talked about. They could potentially keep this game close, if not potentially win this game, but the Texans are still favored, and they are at home in this game, despite some injuries to Tank Dell and potentially Nico Collins. I think they're going to rely heavily on the run in this one. Akers has a pretty good shot to find the end zone in this game against a pretty bad Jacksonville defense, specifically against the run, so he's a pretty good start this week as a flex play. RB25 for me is Jerome Ford. I actually just traded for Jerome Ford in our Flock League. I sent away Rashid Shaheed to Sal. I'll cover that in week 4's vlog. Make sure you guys are following down below in the description. The Flock League channel is linked there. His workload, Jerome Ford's, was pretty fugaz in week 2. I talked about it already, but Deontay Foreman just randomly spiked in production, spiked in rush attempts. But then back in week 3, we did see Jerome Ford back to his full workload. Jerome Ford has an easy defense against the Raiders. We just saw Chuba Hubbard go nuclear against them, and I do think that the Browns should be able to run the ball in this game. They're kind of an ass offense. We all know this. Deshaun Watson's playing like shit. Their offensive tackles are hurt. Hopefully their offensive line can get a little bit healthier in time for this game, but I'm trusting the workload here with Jerome Ford. There's a couple guys in a row here that I've just said, I'm just going to trust the workload on these guys, and Jerome Ford is one of them, and the next guy is also one of them with Chuba Hubbard. He had a big game last week. I do think the 21-gun salute from the Red Rifle was probably a little bit of a fugaz as well, and I don't think that they're going to do that again. I think that was a product of, QB change, invigorates the team. The Bengals are a much better team than the Raiders, even despite their 0-3 record, and I think the Bengals are pissed, and the Bengals will probably win this game. Like I said, I like them -4, -4.5. So for those reasons, I don't think that Chuba Hubbard is an absolute must-play, even though he was the RB3 on the week last week. I feel like everybody's going to just throw him into their lineup because of how good he was last week, but he's still a fine start. It is a top 8 run defense against Cincinnati, and it might not be as favorable as a game script, so definitely keep that in mind for Chuba Hubbard. Running back 27 for me on the week is Tony Pollard. It is the lowest over-under game on the slate, 36.5 points on Monday night. Pollard and the Titans heading to Miami, where Tyler Huntley is probably going to start, I would imagine. I don't know if Skylar Thompson's going to be ready in time, and even if he is, I think Huntley's probably the better quarterback. Tony Pollard had a great workload and has had one all season long. Maybe Will Levis won't shit and piss down his leg and pretty much just be the worst quarterback in the league, minus Bryce Young, of course, but we will see the Dolphins be susceptible to fantasy running backs. They have been all season long. They're 29th in adjusted fantasy points to the running back position. So it is an easy matchup for Tony Pollard. Maybe I have him too low, to be honest. I could probably stand to move him up a little bit. Running back 28 for me on the week is Rico Dowdle. This game going over tonight would not shock me one bit. Normally I have data on the Thursday night game because I'm usually recording this on Saturday, but of course I'm recording this advance before the game is about to kick off in about 2 hours from now. In a winnable game versus the New York Giants, I do think they might finally get a positive game script, because the games that they've played so far, they beat the crap out of the Browns and it was over at halftime. And then the other 2 games they played, they were getting romped by the Saints and the Ravens. So we haven't really had a normal Dallas Cowboys game yet to see what the workload will look like for the running back position. And I think Rico Dowdle, this should be a pretty normal game, close division game, but I do think the Cowboys could get off to a big lead in this one, or maybe at least just be ahead by a touchdown or so throughout the game, and I think Rico Dowdle could take advantage of that and catch some passes. He's had 5 targets in 2 of his first 3 games so far, so he's a pretty decent option, and maybe even a buy low or a pickup if he's available in your league. Running back 29 for me is Carson Steele. This one's pretty simple. I mean, he's the early down back in a game script where the Chargers might be starting Taylor Heineke or a hobbled Justin Herbert. So I think Carson Steele should be set for the Chiefs to earn 15, 20 carries in this game, maybe punch one into the end zone. I'm not convinced that he's very good. I don't think he's actually that good. I think Samaje Perine might actually be a better running back, and maybe Kareem Hunt works into the backfield if he's activated for this game. But he's got to be a flex play as a result of the workload that he saw last week. 64% of the snaps, good percentage of the carries as well. Carson Steele, again, probably not the best guy in the world, but he does have some ability, and he is probably going to carry the ball a number of times. Closing out this area of my rankings here, we do have Roschon Johnson. This is a hard projection, so I don't really want to start a Chicago Bears running back if I don't have to. Injuries, though, are stacking, and most people added this guy off of the waiver wire last week to use. Now, the good news is that DeAndre Swift is certified ass and may continue to lose work to Roschon Johnson, but the bad news is that the Rams are top 5 against fantasy running backs, so this is not a good matchup for Roschon Johnson, and we don't actually know how much of the share of the workload he's going to get. It appears he's trending positively, but we also could see DeAndre Swift go back to his week 1 and week 2 snap share. It seems like the coaching staff's kind of defending him, and I'm seeing the same thing with Rachaad White in Tampa Bay. Sometimes they just want to stick to their starter, the guy that they paid all this money to, but again, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. So moving into the deep league flex plays, a couple guys that if you're desperate, there's a lot of injuries this week. If you need to start a guy like Braylon Allen, I mean, the dude's a sick player. He's the number 1 graded running back by PFF in the on the season right now, and he's the best handcuff in fantasy, but unfortunately, Breece Hall's an absolute hammer. He's my RB1 rest of season in the league. But I do think, even though Breece Hall is as good as he is, I think you can flex Allen on a weekly basis given how efficient he's been so far, and the fact that he's catching passes, the fact that he's actually getting design touches and things of that nature. So Braylon Allen, again, he's probably not going to pay off more than like 11 to 13 PPR points at most if he finds the end zone. But at the same time, that could be worth something to someone. If you guys have an injury at the running back position and you need to just throw somebody into your lineup, I don't think Braylon Allen's the worst guy. Javonte Williams is my RB32. I'm so done talking about Javonte Williams. 11th toughest run defense versus running backs. Some guy who's named after the thing that cleans your ass after you take a shit is taking touches away from him, leading the team in carries last week. Tough times for the Broncos run game. Maybe stash Audric Estime if you guys have an IR spot, because I think at some point Audric Estime could work into the starting rotation of this backfield, because Javonte Williams, he's not it right now. And I feel bad because I really do like Javonte Williams, the player. He just has never looked the same after that ACL tear. So running back 33 for me here is Zamir White. Theoretically, good game script for the Raiders. They are favored by 2 points against the Browns. This backfield has been totally dependent based on who's winning the game. If the Raiders are losing, Alexander Mattison is out there. If the Raiders are winning, then Zamir White is out there. We thought the Raiders were going to control the game against Carolina last week, and then they got their doors blown off, and Alexander Mattison played more snaps. So hopefully it's a close game. I think Zamir White has a role if that's the case. Running back 34 for me on the week is Chase Brown, efficient on his 23% of the snaps, but that's just it. It's 23% of the snaps. How much are you really going to rely on that? I do think he's one of the best stashes in fantasy right now, because I don't really believe in Zach Moss, and Chase Brown looks good. He's actually the 2nd graded running back behind Braylon Allen on PFF rushing grade right now, but at the same time, he hasn't really eaten into that workload at this point in time, so we'll see what happens with Chase Brown there. And then closing out this video, we do have Zach Charbonnet, who I'm still considering a moderate low-end flex play because Kenneth Walker is coming off of a multi-week absence. I'm also, of course, assuming that Zach Charbonnet will not be the full-time starter, because if he is, then he'd be way higher than this. But Kenneth Walker, should he play, still makes Zach Charbonnet somewhat appealing, just given the fact that he's coming off of a multi-week injury. Maybe Charbonnet plays 50% of the snaps or whatever, but it is a terrible matchup. The Detroit Lions are really good against the fantasy running back position. So appreciate you guys for sticking around here. Again, apologies for getting this video out a day early. I know it's a lot better when it comes out on Saturday because we have more information. We know who's going to be playing. We know who's going to be out. We can give you better and more accurate rankings, but I will be updating my rankings even though I'll be gone all weekend at a wedding. I will be back Sunday morning, of course, for our live stream, so you can ask me a ton of questions there, and of course, get our weekly rankings manifesto so that any updates that do happen, you are properly informed for your lineup decisions. We will be live as well, or I guess I'm recording this before we go live, so this doesn't actually matter. But if you do want to ask us questions, you guys know you can go to flockfantasy.com. You can submit a question. We'll answer it on our live stream, or if you want an answer right away, you can actually ask us that as well. And make sure to check out our weekly rankings manifesto. You can get it one of two ways, either on flockfantasy.com, where you can also ask us questions. You can use our trade finder or trade calculator. Trade finder and trade calculator are free features, by the way. You don't actually need a subscription to use them. They're just fun tools that you can go and use to help yourself out. And you can use our expert consensus rankings between myself, between Mason, between the domain guys, the land guys, and all those dudes. But if you want specifically my opinion, you do have to actually make an account and sign up using code FSE for 7 days for free, 30% off any of the packages. And again, you'll get our rest of season rankings. You get our weekly rankings manifesto. If you just want our weekly rankings manifesto, you can get it for free when you sign up over on Underdog Fantasy. Use the code FSE, deposit $10. The manifesto's in your email inbox within 24 hours. So if you're interested in that, both links down below in the description. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.